Hi there, everyone. Michael A. Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology with next week's astrology for the week of September 8th to the week of September 14th, 2024. This is a big week coming up, and a part of why it's big is because we have our professional astrologers diploma program starting on September 14th, which I've been speaking about for the last many months, and it's finally upon us. So if you haven't already checked out that program, then please do check out our website at oraculosastrology.com. It's going to be pretty amazing. I'm so excited to see everybody who's currently signed up for it. I see a lot of my Reiki colleagues from London have also chosen to sign up for it. Well, not London, but Manchester. Before the pandemic, every January, I would go to Manchester, which is probably the worst time in the world to go to Manchester. But I go to Manchester to be with my Reiki family and friends in my Jikiden Reiki community. Jikiden Reiki is the original form of Reiki that was practiced in Japan that has no Western influences whatsoever. So that's where I'd be every January, and I haven't done that in a while. And so I was super thrilled to see some of my Jikiden Reiki colleagues signing up to join us in this upcoming professional astrologers diploma program because this is what we do at Oraculos, and I'm so happy to share it with the people who I love. If you're still on the fence about signing up this weekend, you can drop into our first class because, like most things at Oraculos, our first class, the inaugural class, is something that you can drop in and sit in on just to see how it feels for you. And in this program, this is essentially where I teach you everything that you need to know in order to be a professional astrologer. So if that's something that is feeling like it's calling to you right now, and if you know that you want to practice astrology in a more concrete way where you can feel pretty confident about the things that you're saying to your astrological clients and know that those things resonate or line up with the actual events that have occurred within their lives, then by all means, this is the program that you want to be a part of. And also, we're going to spend 2 years together. Now, if you are commitment averse, like myself, which is a part of why I don't have any tattoos on my body because I'm kind of a commitment phobe. So if you're commitment averse and you just want to pop in for the first weekend, you're more than welcome to do that. And even beyond that, if you just want to pop in for the first 14 weeks that we're going to be coming together, just to really get the things that we teach within that 14-week period, which is we're taking a deep dive on the astronomy that underpins our astrology. I'm going to be teaching you our signature system of horary astrology so that at the minimum, you will leave having a deep level of proficiency and ease when it comes to reading and interpreting any horary chart that you're faced with. You'll be learning our memory techniques that I've used to not only memorize the entire essential dignities table, but that I've also used to memorize a lot of aphorisms that underpin our classical astrology practice. So if you want to learn how to colonize your mind with more mind and also learn the essential dignities table and really know how to bring that into your flesh. And if you're just looking to find a great level of depth and proficiency in horary astrology, then by all means join us this September 14th, which is next weekend. And I cannot wait to see you here. Now, with that being said, we are going to dive straight into our astrology for today. One of the things that is a me thing, and wherever I go and whenever I teach, I always say I'm the problem in the relationship. One of the things that is a problem for me is that I talk a lot. This is a fact of my life. It's always been a fact of my life, and I really don't know what to do about it. And that talking a lot has translated into me teaching a lot. I teach and I overteach. And the part of overteaching is that I really don't want anybody to ever come to Oraculos and feel as if they've only gotten a half of the information that they need in order to be successful in the world, or even to feel as if they've only gotten a small serving and you're going to have to pay another additional set of money in order to receive the larger portion. No, I'm not into gimmicks. I'm not into games. I'm into giving people everything that is within me to give. So it's never occurred to me that when it came to these weekly forecasts, I didn't necessarily have to talk about every single planetary combination that was happening during the week. And, I wish that this was an original idea. I wish that it had emerged within my mind. And I was like, Michael, you don't have to talk about every single planetary combination that occurs within the week. But no, it was Joe, as a lot of good things at Oraculos are Joe based. It was Joe who said, shut up, dumbass. You don't need to talk about every single planetary combination that occurs within the week. And so, as a result of that, I felt this great burden lifted off of my shoulders that I didn't even know I was putting on myself. Because, as you all know, I don't really look at what other people are doing in the astrological community, because I never wanted to be said that I copied something from somebody else. I was going to say something else, but I'm trying to raise my vibration. So I never wanted to be said that I'm copying things from other people. So I don't watch other people's forecasts. I don't listen to other people's podcasts. I don't do other people's stuff, because I want you to feel as if you're in an original space receiving original information. So I didn't know that everybody else had gotten this memo and that I was the last standing dummy who didn't. So as a result of that, today, we're going to be diving into a brand new forecast model in which I'm going to be talking to you all only about the things that I think matter, which seems so brazen and it seems so hubris filled to look at one planetary combination happening on a day and decide which planetary combination is the more important one. It feels like, I'm standing up in the face of God and I'm about to get struck by lightning. Or maybe that's my old Seventh-day Adventist upbringing speaking. But whatever, the point of the matter is we're going to be looking at a much truncated week, which feels like a breath of fresh air, because this week has been a lot for yours truly, and I need a break. So we're going to mosey on through the week of September 8th to September 14th so that you could have the astrology that you love. All right, I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to stall for just 30 more seconds. And in that 30 more second stall, in which I'm going to pull up the chart in the background, I want to invite all of you to join us for our upcoming cosmobiology, psychological, and medical astrology retreat. And I want this to stay on the screen as long as it takes for me to pull up the actual chart in the background, which I should have done earlier, but I did not do it earlier because, once again, who's the problem in our relationship? It is me. All right, so I want you to join us for our upcoming cosmobiology retreat, in which we're going to be diving into medical astrology. If you've always wanted to learn medical astrology, and I've recently been told that I can't actually even say medical astrology anymore online for fear that we get our privileges removed by the powers that be. But the point is, if you have always wanted to learn medical astrology, if that's something that you're really interested in and you want to learn how to bring that deeply into your practice, then by all means, come and study with us here at the Oraculos School of Astrology, because that is all we do. When I say that's all we do, I mean that is literally all we do on a daily basis. We don't do anything else. We don't talk about anything else. At the moment, that's the only class that's being taught. It's going to be great. I'm going to teach you our medical astrology rubric. We're going to meet with over 80 clients in our 7 days together. It's going to be quite intense, but you're going to have a whale of a time with me right here in Boston, Massachusetts. So make sure to come on down. You can check out our website at oraculosastrology.com/retreats 2024. All right. So that is it. Hey there, Tammy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, people. So let's see. I'm going to pull up. We could take this off the screen now. We're going to pull up the screen share of the chart for today. Let me see. Let's bring this up. And here we go. So this is the chart for the 8th of September, which is Sunday, the 8th of September, 2024. And like I said, Joe told me I don't have to talk about everything. And so I'm going to exercise that privilege right away and only talk about, maybe I'll talk about two things happening today. So one of the things happening today is that at 12:34 a.m. EDT, we have the sun in an opposition with Saturn, and we're going to talk all about what that is going to mean and what it usually denotes. And then the next thing that we're going to talk about is Venus in a sesquiquadrate relationship with Uranus, and that's happening at 9:19 a.m. EDT. And we're going to talk about that as well. And there's other things happening in the sky, but I'm going to ignore them, God damn it. So the first thing happening is Sun opposite Saturn, and Sun opposite Saturn denotes a day that tends to be a bit of a drain. When we think about Sun Saturn, we don't necessarily like it because Sun Saturn has to do with the physical manifestation of melancholy. As we know within traditional astrology, Saturn was the god of melancholy. The ancients say that Saturn is the author of melancholy. Hey there, Cameron. Hey, Tammy. Hey, Melanie. I'm so happy to see all of you. Hi there, HFG. So happy that all of you are here. So, once again, oh, and also if you're here and you're tuning in and you're listening right now, please let us know where you're signing in from, where you're tuning in from, where you're listening in from, because, that's also good information to have. And also because I want to know you a little bit better. So, if you're listening right now, please let us know in the chat box where you are tuned in from, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's from Nebraska. Let us know. Okay, so Saturn is thought of as the god of melancholy. So on days where we have hard aspect relationships between the Sun and Saturn, it's something that we really don't enjoy because the Sun and Saturn as a combination has to do with the physical manifestation of melancholy, which is a physical manifestation of a feeling of density or heaviness or lethargy that's manifesting within ourselves. And sometimes that can make it seem that much more difficult for us to do anything within the world. So on Sun Saturn days, we all feel a little bit more depressed. We all feel a little bit more heavy. We feel as if the weather around us is getting that much colder because it feels as if there's a lack of warmth and a lack of vitality in the air. So that's how we're diving into September the 8th, Sunday, September the 8th. It's a little bit crazy as far as things are concerned because we don't usually use Sun Saturn days to manifest anything of a positive nature. Now, earlier, or I think 2 years ago, when I first started to do this, once again, when I was trying to talk about every single planetary combination, I spoke about the Sun Saturn combination as representing our down days and the Sun Jupiter combination as representing our up days. And so, is Sun Saturn as a hard aspect in the sky is saying that this really isn't a day that we want to do anything about, especially if it's something that we associate with pleasure. So it's not a great day to get married. It's not a great day to, start your business. It's not a great day to undergo fertility treatment. It's not a great day for a lot of stuff because the heaviness of the Sun Saturn is oftentimes a heaviness that has the ability to squash even our best intentions. So it's a down day, this Sun Saturn day on the 8th of September. And also on this day, like I said, we also the Venus in the sesquiquadrate relationship with Uranus. And Venus sesquiquadrate Uranus, it's something that can either bring excitement in our relationships or disruptions within our relationships. As astrologers, we have to be able to take several planetary combinations and see how those several combinations are going to work together to manifest something that makes sense. So if the day is already starting with Sun Saturn, heaviness in the air, depression in the air, seriousness in the air, a feeling of being unloved, unnurtured, uncared for, and we have Venus Uranus, it's unlikely that the Venus Uranus combination is going to manifest in the best of ways because a negative plus what is oftentimes a negative doesn't equal a positive. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, from a traditional astrology perspective, tend to manifest as malefics within traditional astrology. And the only way they manifest as benefics is if they are manifesting or occurring within a sky that has larger prevailing benefic combinations. So this isn't a sky that has larger prevailing benefic combinations because on this day, we have the Sun opposite Saturn. And to a very large extent, which I need to stop saying. There are these stupid filler things that people say, and I've recently realized that to a very large extent is one of the stupid filler things that I say. Maybe I need to go join Toastmasters or something. Anyway, the point is, that Sun Saturn truly denotes not the best day in the world. So, if the larger prevailing energy is something that isn't already good, and Uranus usually tends to not being good, then that means that this Venus Uranus combination doesn't bring us excitement in our relationships on this day. It has the ability to bring us disruption and argument and friction and separation and severance within our relationships, and possibly a feeling of us being bored, and possibly us thinking that the way how the Sun Saturn is manifesting, i.e., the sense of depression or melancholy, is manifesting specifically as a result of the angst that we feel within our intimate connections. So, this may not happen for everybody, but if you are somebody who tends to be sensitive to the astrology of the day, then this is something that you want to be mindful of. And you also want to make sure that you're not, putting your, what's it called? Putting your, redirecting your angst towards the people in your life, when in fact, you, like me, might also be the problem. So these are the two things happening on this day, the September 8th. And now we're going to move on to September 9th. It feels so lovely to not have to do everything. I'm so excited to be alive right now. And once again, because it is now my prerogative to choose which of the things happening on September 9th I think is most notable and most noteworthy, we're going to talk about the fact that on September 9th we have Mercury ingressing into Virgo, and that's happening at 2:49 a.m. EDT. We have Mercury ingressing into Virgo. And let me just change this forward one day, September 9th. So, coming back over here, one of the things that you all know I love to do. Oh, hi there, Carolina from New Jersey. And hey there, Tammy from Virginia Beach. And Melanie from Melbourne. Melanie, you're up very, very late. And I'm very happy that you're here, but it's really, really late, Melanie. You're a trooper. Jamie from Philadelphia. Jessica from Oregon. Intense desire. Intense desire. When I read your name, I had to take a deep and cleansing breath. But intense desire from Kauai, Hawaii, and then Cameron from Delaware. Hey there, everybody. I'm so happy to have you all here. Now, one of the things that you all know that I love to do when it comes to these forecasts is I love to also give you insight into how these combinations would manifest from a medical astrology perspective. Because once again, as you all know, that is the very air that we breathe here at Oraculos. And that wasn't always that way. And I have a very intensely layered medical astrology story as to how we got to where we got today at Oraculos as far as medical astrology is concerned. And maybe I'll tell you that one day. And maybe when I tell you that, I'll tell you that privately, off air, because there's a lot of moving parts to that story. And some of it, is just not suitable for public consumption because it involves other people. But the point of the matter is that medical astrology is a huge part of everything that we do at Oraculos, and I love it so much. And I was feeling good for a very long time about being able to provide you this sort of concrete planetary based medical astrology information within the context of these forecasts. And however, it seems as if when we use those words together, medical and astrology, it causes the algorithm to lose its shit. Because for the algorithm, those two words don't belong together, which is no fault of the algorithm, because we live in a day and age where we don't even know, for so many of us, this concept of a medical astrology reading is so new that we are probably just also learning that those two words belong together. It's kind of like financial astrology, even though I think people are far more willing to think that financial astrology is a thing than medical astrology is a thing. But the point of all of this is that because the algorithm has completely lost its brains in relationship to my use of those two words, it's limited our scope and it's limited our reach here on the Oraculos Astrology Show. And as a result of that, we have a much smaller audience by design because the algorithm isn't allowing us to reach more people. So, how can you help with this? You could help with this by subscribing to the Oraculos Podcast, of course, but you could also help with this by liking this video wherever you're watching it right now. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can like it on YouTube. If you're watching it on Facebook, like it on Facebook. If you're watching it on Twitter, you can like it on Twitter. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever. That's the way how we can use our human resources, i.e. you, to help us overcome some of these blockages, because the more and more people who interact with this content, with all of our use of the term medical astrology, the more and more the algorithm realizes that, hey, this is actually probably something that's okay. And at the minimum, it's probably something that somebody in the world believes in. So let's not prevent people from having access to this information. So thank you for your support. Now, coming back to the chart, we see that on this day we have the Mercury ingressing into Virgo, which is great. I like Mercury ingressing into Virgo just like anybody else. And the reason why I like it is because that is Mercury's domicile and exaltation. One of the reasons why I've been speaking about medical astrology so much in relationship to the signs of the zodiac is because we have this rich and long lasting history, astrologically speaking, about what it means when a planet is in a particular sign and afflicted in that sign. That's very foundational to Western medical astrology. That, as well as planet to planet combinations in terms of aspects that occur between planets. So, Virgo is the domicile and the exaltation of Mercury, and Mercury does very well within that sign. It's a very productive day that we have being ushered in on September 9th. It's a day where we all have a sense of being able to ground our own cerebral energies. And you all know how I feel about the word energies. But it's a day when we all have the ability to ground our intellectual gifts and abilities and charge them in the direction of doing something concrete. Mercury is the god of the hands and also the god of fine motor skills. And as my grandmother always said, growing up in the Bahamas, that the devil, the idle hands are the devil's workshop. And so when we have Mercury in Gemini, for example, Mercury doesn't do as well as when Mercury is in Virgo, because Mercury in Gemini can oftentimes just be idle hands, getting its hands mixed up and involved in multiple things at the same time. Whereas Mercury in Virgo has a sense of direction, it has a center of gravity, it has a means of grounding us into doing things that have a clear start, a clear middle, and a clear end. So if you're wanting to initiate something and you want for that thing to be initiated under the auspices of a Mercury that has the ability to ground you and settle you and stabilize you through every part of that project's unfolding, then September 9th at around 2:49 a.m. EDT is a great time to initiate those efforts. Now, if you're not anal retentive, and you don't need for it to happen exactly at 2:49 a.m., then anytime on this day after Mercury is ingressed into Virgo, this is Mercury Day. This day is a wonderful day for you to ground all of your things in the shape of something physical and practical, because that's what Mercury in Virgo means. Mercury is a god of erratic motion, and when Mercury is in Virgo, Mercury has some level of gravitas and some level of density and some level of purposefulness. So if there's something that you're doing or that you want to do that is of extreme importance to you or that is extremely purposeful to you, then aligning it with September 9th, once Mercury ingresses into Virgo, would be a wonderful time to do that. Have I told you all already that Joe told me that I didn't have to talk about every single combination on the day? So as a result of that, we're going to move on through to September the 10th. Because even though the sky on September 9th is full of stuff, I'm not going to be dragged down into those rabbit holes. So we're now moving on to September 10th, which is Tuesday, September 10th. Hey there, Martha Keane. Hey there, Healthy Quadrants. Hey there, Laura Altman from Westchester, New York. And hey there, Lisa James and chat. Please do, once again, if you're just joining, you could let us know where you're joining in from, just so that we could know, where our Oraculos family is at right now. Now, moving on through on September 10th, the only thing that we have by hard aspect happening in the sky is we have Venus. Here we see Venus at 14 degrees of Libra in a square aspect relationship with Hades. And here we see Hades at 14 degrees Cancer, 31 minutes. Since I'm not going to talk about every planetary combination, I am going to take the time to talk to you about why someone like me should believe in something like a Hades floating around in the sky. You could bring me back, Anna. The reason why we at Oraculos, and that's also not true, because I believe in order. I'm a very Saturnian person. I believe in order. And growing up in the Caribbean, one of the Bible verses that, if you've grown up in a Jamaican household, and I think that this was more so in my grandmother's household than in my Bahamian family's household. But if you grew up in a Jamaican household with Jamaican grandparents, you would have heard at some point in your life that God is a God of decency and order, which is the most random Bible verse that gets pulled out every single time you're doing something that your grandparents feel is chaotic. They say, my God is a God of decency and order. So that idea of decency and order is something that has completely permeated every part of my own approach to teaching astrology. And so, as you all know, I'm a Renaissance astrologer to a very large degree, which actually isn't the best title in the world, but whatever. If we have to call ourselves something, we'll call it that. I'm a Renaissance astrologer to a very large degree. I met an astrologer once who was of the opinion that I won't even use a gender. I met an astrologer once who was of the opinion that they created the term Renaissance astrology. WTF, person, who do you think you are? Jesus? Anyway, so I'm a Renaissance astrologer. It's crazy. Astrology as a field is a field where, let me not even say that. Once again, keeping my vibration high. So I'm a Renaissance astrologer and I'm also a Uranian astrologer. And within the context of my practice, I've found a very clear way to keep those two things separate. And so at Oraculos, when I teach astrology, I teach both within their own season. I believe that it is every astrologer's responsibility to know the foundations of classical astrology and to know astrology in general. And astrology in general is based on roots that are hundreds of thousands of years old. And I think that as astrologers practicing in a field that already is chaotic, astrology is one of the most chaotic disciplines in the world that works. Can you imagine? It works, but it's a complete shit show to a very large degree. And I believe that as people who are practicing in a field that is foundationally chaotic, we all have to find a way to ground ourselves somewhere and to at least come close to speaking a common language. And the common language, as far as I'm concerned, and once again, I'm not the boss of anyone other than the people who I'm the boss of, but in general, that common language is always going to be traditional astrology. If you know traditional astrology, you can do anything. You can do modern astrology, you could do psychological astrology, you could do those other people's astrology, you could do dragonfly astrology, you could do anything. Whereas if you start your astrological practice with dragonfly astrology, you're limited to just that because your entire scope and your entire understanding of things is in just that. So I believe that astrologers should have a thorough, unadulterated understanding of traditional astrology on its own terms. And to that end, I think I've done a damn good job in terms of the people who've studied at Oraculos and have gone out into the world to represent what they've learned within this space. I could die happy tomorrow as a result of the astrologers who I've created. Now, stepping outside of that, I'm also a Uranian astrologer. And I know that Uranian astrology is its own thing. It has to be taught within its own compartment, in the same way as traditional astrology is its own thing and it has to be taught in its own compartment. The question has often arisen, how is it that someone like me, who is so gung-ho Saturnian and traditional astrology oriented on the one hand, can practice something so dumb as Uranian astrology? And that question comes from people who come and they see me do a blind chart reading and their socks are blown off and they're amazed, like, oh my God, how did you know that? You're so great. You've read that chart so well, but how can you practice something so stupid as Uranian astrology if you're this great astrologer in this other capacity? I think that collectively we all need to step down off of our high horse and realize that if you think that somebody is brilliant in one sphere, or if you think that someone is brilliant in multiple spheres, then you shouldn't so easily think that that person would be absolutely stupid in another sphere of their life that is adjacent to the other spheres that you think that they're brilliant in. For example, there's a book, and I found this book when I was in university, and it's a book called "Why Do Smart People Believe Dumb Things?" And it's basically a book that's exploring all the reasons why people who are scientists and doctors and they have their PhDs and they're surgeons and they're all of these things. How do these people who are so smart, who've gone through so many years of university training, turn around and still believe in something like astrology or energy healing or acupuncture or any of these things, basically, that some people would consider it to be fringe science or pseudoscientific or just quackery, basically. And I think the premise of that is wrong, because if you believe that someone is brilliant in one sphere of their lives, if someone has gone through over 14 years of training to become a surgeon, how do you then turn around and think that that person is stupid because of their astrological belief? The same brilliant person who's cutting your mother open and giving her open heart surgery, but also believes in astrology, has probably found reasons to believe in that astrology that makes sense within the larger context of who they are and what they do. So the same thing is what I extend to those of you who ask me this question. How can I be so brilliant from a traditional astrological perspective, but be so dumb as to believe in planets that don't exist? And this isn't the format for this today. This isn't the place in which I want to go into this conversation. But the reality is, if you think that I'm brilliant in natal astrology and in electional astrology and in medical astrology and in all the other demonstrations of astrology that I've demonstrated, don't so easily believe that I've somehow turned off my brilliance in order to practice this bullshit of Uranian astrology, because the Uranian astrology has proven itself to me with just as much depth and profundity as all of the traditional things have that you like me for. So, anyway, coming back to the chart for today and for right now, we have Venus in a square relationship with Hades. Venus square Hades is a problematic combination because Hades is as problematic as it sounds. Hades has to do with all things of an underworld nature. Hades has to do with sorrow and bereavement and death and disease and famine and poverty and the grungy side of life. And Hades has to do with us being pursued by misfortune. So Venus Hades happening on the 10th of September is saying to us that there could be something occurring on this day that is directly impacting things that are Venusian in our society, and that's directly dirtying them or impoverishing them or sullying them. Venus represents our intimate relationships with each other. Venus also represents women. And Venus Hades as a combination has to do with atrocities done against women or issues that directly impact women within our societies or harms done to women within society. So this could be a day where the whole topic of women's rights could come up very strongly as a result of us hearing about something going on as far as women's rights are concerned that leaves us all feeling a little bit less comfortable with the current state of humanity. I think another thing that's interesting with this Venus Hades combination is it's happening right before September 11th. And Venus Hades also has to do with beauty that arises out of misery or beauty that arises out of despair. I went to New York recently when I realized that catching the train was actually a thing that people could do. I caught the train. I caught the Amtrak. And after I caught the Amtrak, I was like, oh my God, everybody, I caught the train. But that wasn't the train people were telling me I should catch. People were telling me I should catch like the green line and the orange line. And I felt like I was so living on the edge because I caught a first class train, Amtrak, to New York, where they fed me tiramisu. Anyway, I caught the train to New York. And when I went to New York, I stayed in this place because I went to see my sister and my nephew, because she brought my nephew to New York for me to see him. And it was basically right next door to, where was it? It was right next door to the World Trade Center monument. And I didn't even know it, basically. And I went walking, and then I saw all of these people, and they were like standing around this huge hole in the ground. And I didn't even know that I was standing right next to where the World Trade Center used to be. And it was so beautiful. It was so, so, so beautiful. And it had all the names of all of the people who passed away, or I think it was the people who were actually in the World Trade Center. All of their names were on this monument. And the way how the water fell, there was something so, it was beautiful, but it was also sorrowful. Like there was something about that, like something about the cascade of the water, where it wasn't just turning on a faucet. It was like the water was falling, then it slowed down before it reached the bottom. And I don't know, I think it's something with the architecture, but it was so stunning and so beautiful and so sad. And this big hole in the ground, I think there is something so symbolic of seeing this huge hole, this gaping hole carved out in the earth, as being representative of all that was lost on that day. It was stunning and profound. And that is a Venus Hades work of art. That is a work of art, Venus, that arises out of despair, or that arises out of chaos, or that arises out of annihilation, or that arises out of catastrophe. The World Trade Center monument is that, to a very large degree. So this is happening on September 10th, which is the day before 9/11. And it's just interesting to note that that is what's in the air. Okay, now moving on to the next day, which is going to be September 11th. September 11th, you know? September 11th. Okay, let's just talk for 1 second, because that is coming, like this is coming up, September 11th. Everybody knows exactly where they were on September 11th, 2021. On September 11th, 2020, and if you remember where you were on September 11th, 2021, please let us know in the comment section, please. So on September 11th, 2021, I was in the 4th grade. Bring me back. Let me tell you my 4th grade story. I was in the 4th grade, and I'll never forget it. And I also remember the teacher who I was in the 4th grade with. So my grandparents, my grandfather, who's from Jamaica, he died when I was 4 years old. And as a result of that, and it's through him that I have Jamaican citizenship today. So thank you, Benjamin, Brian, wherever you are within the cosmos. But as a result of that, he left my mother to essentially live with some of his Jamaican relatives. And those are the people who I know as my grandparents. And that is the household that I lived in. That's my Jamaican household where I spent most of my childhood. And what about this? And so everybody knew this, because the church that, our family was very big church family. Basically, we were very deeply ingrained in the church, and everybody knew this, and everybody would see me with my grandfather every Sabbath, every Saturday. My grandfather, who was really, I guess, like my great grand cousin or something, but he's the person who raised me, and he was who I call granddad. And my 4th grade teacher, I'll never forget this, the same September 11th teacher, she said to me one day, she was like, "Oh, it's Friday. Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm going by my grandparents' house." And this woman, I swear to God, she turns around and says to me, Why do you keep on calling those people your grandparents? They're not your real grandparents anyway, which was the most facetious and disgusting and ugly thing anybody could ever say, because she was well aware of my family. She knew who my mother was. She knew who everybody in our family was. She watched me grow up from a baby. She watched me grow up with those people all of my life, and then to turn around and say something like that, it was the nastiest, ugliest thing that I've ever been said. The only thing nastier than that came from somebody who married into our family, who had the same sentiment, who a few years after saying that to me, the universe decided to take her out of this life. So anyway, that's not actually funny. So September 11th, I was in the fourth grade, and I'll never forget that I was sitting down. We were in the middle of an exam, and it's crazy that she had her radio on during the exam, but she had a radio on during the exam, and we heard it over the radio what was going on in New York. And we heard, as you know, the first plane crashed, and everybody thought it was an accident. And then the second plane crashed, and people were like, oh my God, this is intentional. And we just sat there in the middle of this exam listening to this whole thing play out. Also, who gives exams in September? Anyway, we listened to this whole thing play out while we were in the middle of this exam, and then we went home, and the rest is history. So that's my September 11th story. Where were you on 9/11? This day we have someone said, I was in high school, social studies, girl in the back of the class on her earphone says the radio says some, yeah. Okay. It was a lot. It was a big day. All right. So on September 11th, this coming September 11th, we're going to bring this back up on the screen. We don't really have much going on in the sky today that I want to talk about. But on this day, we do have the moon ingressing into Capricorn, and that's happening at 10:37 p.m. EDT. And I think that that's noteworthy. And the reason why I think that's noteworthy is because the moon in Capricorn, and we can see it on the screen because I have this set to a day-by-day modulus. But let's see if I move this forward a couple hours. Let's move this forward 12 hours. Here we have the moon ingressing into, where'd she go? Moon ingressing into Capricorn. So, and this is, anyway, the point is the moon ingresses into Capricorn on this day. Moon in Capricorn is interesting because Dorotheus of Sidon tells us that when the moon is in Capricorn, it's as if not as if, he says our mother is a slave. He says when the moon is in any of the domiciles of Saturn, your mother will be a slave. That's his statement. I found this to be more so truthful when the moon is in Capricorn than when the moon is in Aquarius. But his idea was that the mother is a slave when the moon is in the domiciles of Saturn. And we're specifically saying that that's Capricorn. And while I'm not assigned to the zodiac person, the moon in the signs of her domicile, exaltation, detriment, and fall does have a lot of content that is useful for us to pay attention to. For example, oftentimes when people have the moon in Capricorn, their mother might be overworked and underpaid. And as a result of the great level of work that the mother is doing within this lifetime, she doesn't really have the ability to step forward into the role of motherhood in the way that she would want to step forward into that role, because she's struggling to make ends meet in a very real way. And as a result of that, she can't also show up fully with all of the maternal graces that your cousin Jenny is getting from her mother. And as a result of that, it can leave us with this very real feeling of being unnurtured, uncared for, underfed, undervalued. When I was living in Cuba and studying dance in Cuba, one of the things that we do within the Cuban dance technique is the contraction that's found in the Martha Graham technique. And this idea of contraction in Cuba is so visceral. And it's also visceral in the Graham technique as well. But it's so visceral because one of the things that they say to us in school is, remember back in the 90s when there was nothing to eat other than tomatoes and white beans. Now, I wasn't in Cuba in the 90s. However, I've heard from many of my friends and colleagues and my teachers who grew up during that period that when the world cut Cuba off and Russia was the only place that was still friendly or kind to Cuba, all they had to eat was white beans and tomatoes all day, every day, because the tomatoes were the one crop that was growing, and apparently there was this abundance of white beans. And so when they would say that, what they meant was we needed to carve out our abdomen even further so that we could look completely as if there was a hole in our stomach, basically. It was a very strong visual. And if you've ever seen somebody do the Cuban modern dance technique and take the contraction from a Cuban perspective, it is this, it's this godly moment of deep yearning and deep, it's hard to explain. You just have to see it. Maybe you'll see me do it one day. But within all of that, that is the moon in Capricorn. The moon in Capricorn is Cuba during the 90s, when all that was there to eat was white beans and tomatoes. It was that period of malnutrition and not being able to be in dialogue with a wider world that had the ability to support and allow us to feel fed in the way that we needed to feel fed. And so the moon in Capricorn manifests like this within the charts of people as far as the mother is concerned. This is going to be the truth 8.5 times out of 10. And the other 1.5 times out of 10, then it's not going to be true. But 8.5 times out of 10, the moon in Capricorn, when a person is having the moon in Capricorn, this can largely be the story that accompanies them in this lifetime as far as their mother is concerned. And what else do I want to say about this? And this will even more so be the case the more afflicted that moon is. And by afflicted, I mean moon in hard aspect to any of the malefics, which includes Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I have a question, asking for the kids in the back. Bring me back up, please. I have a question. Are we still in a period of astrology where we don't think that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto do stuff, particularly within traditional astrology? Because, I think there was a time when it was cool for a traditional astrologer to dog all the other traditional astrologers who use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Maybe we're still in that time. I don't know. But are we still doing that? And if so, why? Michael, I'll say it. Rob Hand is, for a lot of people, the father of Western traditional astrology. And I was of the impression that since Rob Hand represents this god to so many people within the traditional astrological community, that less people would be so offended by the notion of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, because Rob Hand is a man who uses Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I've even seen Rob Hand give a lecture on Chiron, which is crazy, like when I was still a baby non-boomer hating Chiron, Rob Hand was out in these streets giving lectures on Chiron. So I just don't understand why, as a community, why be so against something, especially if it's proven itself time and time again. Traditional astrologers, or this particular brand of traditional astrologers, says that, hey, the ancients didn't use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, it doesn't exist. And then when that argument, because that's always an argument that's going to win, because of course they didn't know that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were there, because Uranus was only discovered in 1781, 1784 by William Herschel and his sister. But the point is, there has been so much work since then by the astrological community. 1784, I think, was the year when Uranus was discovered. Fast forward, the 1784, 1884, 1984. What is that? That's over 200 years, isn't it? It's over 200 years going on to 300 years. We've had at least Uranus within our astrological practice. Do you mean we haven't done enough research over the last 200 years to know how Uranus is manifesting, astrologically speaking? I've never seen a chart in my entire life where somebody has had Uranus conjunct the ascendant, and they didn't come from an erratic, volatile, unstable household. I've actually never seen it. Every single time you have Uranus conjunct the ascendant, it means my family home was unstable. There wasn't really a strong structure of knowing who held which roles within my family home. My family moved around a lot. My family moved 20 times by the time as I was 10 years old. There was a divorce within my family, and as a result of that, it's left me with this foundational feeling of fear within my heart where I think that somebody's always going to leave me. Because when I have Uranus conjunct the ascendant, I don't necessarily feel settled within any relationship that I have manifesting within my life, because I always carry this residual fear that someone is going to manifest in the same volatile, unstable, and erratic way as my family members did. And as a result of that, I don't feel really safe, or I don't feel really grounded or settled anywhere. I always feel an air of angst or anxiety within my heart and mind because of the family situation I've come from. Same thing with Uranus conjunct the IC. Uranus conjunct the IC, Uranus conjunct the ascendant, family of divorce, the parents split up, and as a result of that, I was volleyed back and forth between the two parents my entire life. And as a result of that, Uranus conjunct the IC, I don't really know where to call home. And as a result of that, as a grown ass adult, I find myself not being able to stay in one apartment for longer than 6 months. Every 6 months, I find myself moving to a different apartment because. The point is, we've studied these things long enough. So maybe this is a part of why I don't really have friends in the traditional astrological community to a very large degree, especially that type of person who needs to hold on to the purity of a thing to the point of the purity of that thing creating a half life. A half life. I'm reminded of the Devil card. The Devil card, which we know in the Kabbalistic Tarot, has the glyph of Saturn on the palm of his hand. Why does he have the glyph of Saturn on the palm of his hand? Because the Devil card represents the ways in which our dogmatic views about the traditions of the world, the ways in which our dogmatism surrounding traditional approaches to life can sometimes chop us off at our legs and can sometimes prevent us from experiencing the grandeur of the you know what universe. I feel like cursing, but I'm not going to curse because today isn't that day. But we can be so dogmatic about our traditional perception of the way in which things should be that it prevents us from interacting with a much wider cosmos. And I don't understand it. And there was a point in my life where I felt as if I had to prove myself to those people, but I can't prove myself to no one. Right now I'm trying to make sure that I eat enough protein on a daily basis and get iron in my diet because I'm a vegetarian. I'm tired. I'm not proving nothing to nobody no more because the proof is already in the pudding. And the proof has been proven long before I was even born and long before I said, welcome to the Oraculos Podcast. The proof has been there of the efficacy of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto for many, many years within our astrological history. And it's there waiting for people who are in a place and in a position where they're open to seeing it. It's really, really, really crazy to me that we're still there. But I'm going to move on because this podcast has become long for a different reason. Not because the week is long, but because I am long winded and clearly because I have things on my mind that I should bet to be talking to my therapist about who I don't have because I don't make enough money to have a therapist. So we're going to move on and talk about what's the next thing happening on today. We spoke about the moon in Capricorn, and that's it for that. Now, September 12th, hooray! September 12th. We're going on to the next day, which is September 12th. Let's go forward one day. This is going to be, how is that happening? This is going to be Thursday, September 12th. What do we have going on Thursday, September 12th? We have, what is it? Where is it? we have the Sun square Jupiter. Sun square Jupiter. I love that. Here we have the Sun at 19 degrees of Virgo, and here we have Jupiter at 20 degrees of Gemini. Who doesn't love a Sun square Jupiter? I love Sun square Jupiter. Remember when I told you that September 8th was a pretty bad day because we had the Sun opposite Saturn? Well, it's the truth. And on September 12th, we have the Sun in a square relationship with Jupiter, which makes it a pretty great day because Sun square Jupiter and Sun in any hard aspect with Jupiter is one of the things that that was my first for the day. Somebody should charge me a fine. Anyway, the Sun square Jupiter is one of the things that we look for in terms of auspicious days. So, cutting a long story short, September 12th is a great day. It's a wonderfully auspicious day. It's a day of physical manifestations of success. The word physical comes from the Sun, success comes from the Jupiter. It's a lovely day. I wouldn't not use it for something. So, if you have something on your mind that you're wanting to surround with a layer of additional successful energy, then today is a wonderful day to do that on the 12th of September because Sun square Jupiter is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful combination. That combination is going to perfect at 6:52 a.m. EDT. If there was anything I needed some extra luck behind, I would do it on this day, the 12th of September. Now, my list seems to be freaking itself all the way out because it has my 13th mixed up crazily with the 14th. Oh, okay. So we're going to move on one more day now to the 13th of September. On the 13th of September, it doesn't really seem as if there is all that much happening in the sky. I'm going to close this and refresh this one more time so that I could see. Wow. So the 13th of September, the sky is very dull as far as things are concerned, which is nice. You know, we like a dull sky sometimes. And there's nothing to report. Maybe if we were looking at soft aspects, there'd be something to report, but there's nothing to report. Now, why do we only use hard aspects? Once again, everybody, like I said to you earlier, I would usually be giving you the medical astrology lowdown with all of these aspects as well, because as you know, at Oraculos, we eat, drink, sleep, and defecate medical astrology on a daily basis. It's all we're doing at the moment. And as we go into next semester, with our intermediate group of students, that's what we're going to be doing there as well. Why? Because I am a very independent person, but I'm also a person who needs people, which is crazy. I must be a wreck to be in a relationship with. I'm like a cat. I'm like independent, but I'm also very needy. And I think that I created Oraculos as an extension of that neediness because I needed a community of people who I could speak with. And I needed a community of people who I could talk to astrology with without the burden of feeling as if I needed to appease the signs of the zodiac gods. And in every other astrological space, I oftentimes find my brain cells turning into ashes in my mouth. Because when I enter other astrological spaces, the first question people want to know, or the first thing people ask is, oh my God, what's your sun, moon, and rising? And that question is the anathema of me because anyway, I'm just gonna leave it there. I hate that question. It's a really crazy question. I think that if we could do it all over again, we would be asking people questions like, hey, what's the most prominent aspect in your chart? Because that, as a community of people practicing a technical field, that is a university level question. Asking people what their sun, moon, and rising is a kindergarten level question. So I think that collectively, if we were to practice astrology in a way that was a little bit less teasable i.e., a little bit less easy to be teased by the non astrological community because we keep on rendering down the entirety of life to these 12 signs of the zodiac. A more intelligent question upon first meeting someone for the first time would be, hey, what's the most prominent aspect within your chart? Maybe you don't even know how to put those words together and you don't want to talk about no prominent aspect. In which case, ask them, hey, what is the most prominent planet within your chart and how does that play out? That for me is a question that I would sit down. If somebody had a podcast in which all they did was ask people, hey, what's the most prominent planet within your chart and how has that impacted your life? I would gobble that up. I would give that person my life savings, which I have none. I would give that person my first child, which is impossible because that's not in my natal promise. I would give everything to that person because that is interesting astrology for me, not what is your sun sign and how does that play out in your life. What is the most prominent aspect in your life? And the reason why that would be more interesting for me is because we need more on the ground, boots on the ground understanding of aspects. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of books exist telling you what it means to be a Taurus, what it means to be an Aries. Shit, you could even find a book that tells you what it means to be Ophiuchus, because there are people who are definitely on the Ophiuchus train, which is fine. I mean, do what serves you. If that brings you closer to God, then go for it. But you could find books about what it means to be everything. And actually, let me keep it high. The point is that is where I think we should be focusing on the aspects. Now, to this note of the aspects, hard aspects make shit happen. That's just a fact of life. Hard aspects just make things happen. And there are some people who want to get in the astrological nitty-gritty and the philosophical weeds of, is astrology a causal thing or is astrology a reflective thing? In other words, does astrology actually cause stuff to happen or does astrology just reflect the things that's already happening? Be in those weeds if those weeds make you happy. But the point of life is that whatever side of those weeds you land on, you cannot deny that hard aspects either correspond with the manifestation of physical events or hard aspects makes physical events happen. Period. They make stuff happen, which is a part of why at Oraculos, the higher up the educational food tree we go, we tend to only focus on hard aspects. I thought that this was, a brazen idea at first. And then I realized that a lot of stalwart astrologers and the astrologers who I think are worth their weight in gold only focus on hard aspects as well. Because a soft aspect might be able to describe something psychological, but a hard aspect corresponds with the manifestation of a concrete event. I once heard a very popular astrologer whose name I will not call because, as you all know, I don't call people's names because it will never be said in my obituary that Michael Bryan sat down slandering nobody's names on a weekly basis because I'm not the person. But I once heard a very popular astrologer say, what did this person say? This nameless, genderless person. This person said that Uranian astrology is so negative because all they focus on is hard aspects. When I hear somebody talking like that, it lets me know that when I hear somebody talking like that, it lets me know that that person has missed the plot entirely. Because when you say that Uranian astrology is so negative because all they focus on is hard aspects, that means that you, as famous as you are with your millions and billions of followers and students and things, you're still stuck within a dichotomy of life in which for you, hard aspect, bad, and soft aspect, good. And as astrologers, we need to know that not everything applies everywhere, which is a level of nuance that is really missing. Because I know that as people, astrology is nobody's first language. Nobody came out of the womb speaking astrology. Even those people who call themselves intuitive astrologers, they didn't come out of the womb speaking of astrology because astrology is nobody's first language. So, in the process of learning a language, we try to find these cognates, or we try to find these things that are very similar to what already exists within our knowledge base. And when we practice it, when we try to speak a language like that, one, we don't get very far because language is about growing more and more and more vocabulary so that you can be fluent and so that you can express nuance. The reason why we study a language for years and years and years is because we want to move beyond saying Michael Black. And we want to move into a place of saying Michael is Black, to possibly moving towards a more nuanced way of saying Michael is a delicious creamy shade of brown and gold, and his hair is looking very nice today, but it's a wash day, so he needs to go wash it. We want to move towards saying things in a more nuanced sort of way, which is why we study languages for a long time. And the same rules apply with our astrology. We want to be able to describe the world around us in a more nuanced way, but somehow we think that the buck stops after you've taken your first astrology course, and it doesn't. And so the reality with this hard aspect bad is it's kind of just as dumb as it sounds. It has no joining verb in between. It's just hard aspect bad. No, where's the is in that? Hard aspect is bad. Where's the plural on that? Hard aspects is bad. Hard aspects are bad. Okay, now it sounds like we're speaking in a more nuanced way. And since we're speaking in a more nuanced way, then I ask you a more nuanced question. Are they really bad? How are they bad? Why are they bad? Where are they bad? Hard aspects will always be bad within the context of a purely traditional astrology practice. Because within a purely traditional astrology practice, yes, if I have an opposition between the ruler of my ascendant and the ruler of my seventh house, yes, hard aspect bad, because that's an opposition between me and the person I'm meant to spend the rest of my life with. If my parents, ruler of the fourth house, ruler of the 10th house, are in a square, opposition, or quincunx, yes, hard aspect bad, because that means that my parents were not able to see eye to eye within this lifetime. Once again, we're just doing a very cursory astrology for dummies approach, because we also know that there are things within our chart that soften some of these things as well. But when we're speaking about astrology through a purely traditional astrological lens, in which a planet both represents what it represents universally, but it also represents what it represents specifically in terms of this specific planet stands as a proxy of this specific person in my life, then yes, soft aspect good, hard aspect bad. That's a wonderful place for you to use that sort of language. But the higher up the astrological food tree you go, when, or I don't even know if it's higher or if it's deeper or where it is spatially, but wherever you go, when you go deeper within your astrological practice, where you lose this classical notion of planets as rulers of houses, and you simply view those planets as God views those planets purely representing themselves, then this notion of hard aspect bad, soft aspect good gets flushed down the gurgler, because you realize that it's only ever been about aspects and how they create life, and aspects and how they contribute to the creation of life. And the creation of life has always been fourfold: the earth, the air, the fire, the water. And that fourfold division of nature is also extended into our ideas regarding our fourfold seasons, our fourfold phases of the moon. And if we wanted to go deeper into that and speak about the 8 phases of the moon, we still find ourselves operating within hard aspect combinations, because our fourfold hard aspects are going to give us our conjunctions, squares, and oppositions. Our eightfold hard aspects are going to give us our conjunctions, semi-squares, squares, sesquiquadrates, and oppositions. And all of these aspects and relationships between planets, they correspond with the manifestation of concrete events. Moon trine Jupiter. This person is nice. They have a lovely personality. Moon square Jupiter. Maybe this person is ingesting too much rich and oily and fatty foods, and as a result of that they have an excess of adipose tissue within their bodies, and as a result of that maybe they have a slower metabolic rate because they're ingesting too much food of a high fat corresponding with Jupiter, high fat, high oil nature, moon Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter doesn't denote that physical manifestation of a physical event. Moon square Jupiter does. And so I'm saying all of this to say that when we speak about the hard aspects between planets, we need to stop thinking that there's something about that angle itself that is bad outside of the context of a purely traditional astrological lens. When we're speaking about the hard aspect that occurs between planets, we need to get ourselves to a place where we realize that hard aspects between planets that don't have a good relationship, such as Moon and Saturn, for example, will manifest something that feels like shit. Whereas hard aspects between planets that do have a good relationship, such as Moon and Venus, will manifest something that doesn't feel like shit. Because that is just how things work. There's nothing about that angular distance of 90 degrees between those two things that manifests evil or challenge between them when we step out of the realm of traditional astrology. The problem is that many of us who practice traditional astrology don't know, or we don't have the range to step out of the realm of traditional astrology. And many of us who practice astrology don't have the range to step out of the realm of traditional astrology, even if we're anti-traditionalists. So we still find ourselves saying this traditional or sharing this traditional astrological rhetoric of hard aspect bad, which is foundational and true within a purely traditional framework where I'm looking at that planet as ruler of this house square, ruler of that house bad, ruler of this house sextile, ruler of that house good. But there's more within heaven and earth Horatio than can exist within your philosophy. So the point is, there's nothing wrong with Uranian astrology. There's something wrong with people who don't understand Uranian astrology and think that they should have an opinion about it. Now, let's move on to the very last, whatchamacallit. Let's move on to the very last day, which is the 14th of September, Saturday. Saturday bad, because Saturday is ruled by Saturn. How about that? Anyway, let's move on to the very last day, which is the 14th of September. And on this day, there really isn't much going on in the sky at all, save for the fact that we have the moon making her last aspect on the day, which is going to be the moon conjunct Pluto, after which she ingresses into, what is that? She's going to ingress into Aquarius. And I don't have much to say about the moon in Aquarius. At least she's not void, of course. And then what do we actually have going on this day that is notable? On this day, as far as hard aspects are concerned, we have our Mercury in a semi-square relationship with Vulcanus, or not Vulcanus rather, but with Zeus, and that's happening at 2:31 p.m. Here we have Mercury. Where is Mercury here? In a semi-square relationship with Zeus at 23 degrees of Libra, and that's happening at, I think it is 2:31 p.m. EDT. And Mercury Zeus has to do with edicts and laws, and it has to do with us putting our firepower behind the words that we're sharing with the world. When we have Mercury Zeus, it says that there is something within us that we believe and that we're not afraid to share it with others around us. And I spoke about this a couple weeks ago, how when a person has a belief about something, they can only defend that belief so far. But when a person has an experience about something, they can speak about that with all of their heart and all of their soul and all of their might and all of their conviction, because that experience lets them know that that thing that they're speaking about is actually true. And Mercury Zeus is the combination of aligning our words with a level of power that can only come out of our experiences. So if there's something that you experience within your life and that you know has a great level of importance and a great level of depth and a great level of impact for you, and you know that it has the ability to change worlds and change lives, then today is a wonderful day for you to share that with others. Truthfully, I chose this day as being the day when we would start our next semester here at the Oraculos School of Astrology because of this Mercury Zeus combination. Because Mercury Zeus has to do with knowing within yourself that that which you know within your mind is in alignment with the very forces and the powers of creation. And what else is astrology other than something that we know is in direct alignment, correspondence with, and reflection with the larger forces of nature around us? So, this is a day for the big mouth. And like I told you already, I have a very big mouth. And that's why this is the day that we're going to be starting our Foundations of Classical Astrology program this 14th of September 2024. And if there's anything that you want to do, or that you want to learn, or that you want to begin, or that you want to pursue intellectually, the 14th of September is a wonderful day for that, because Mercury Zeus is the combination of intellectual excellence, but it's also the combination of charging our mind down a very specific path to accomplish a very specific purpose. On this day as well, we have Venus in a sesquiquadrate relationship with Admetos. And that combination is going to be happening on or at 3:29 p.m. Here we have Venus at 19 degrees of Libra and a sesquiquadrate with Admetos at 4 degrees of Gemini. Truthfully, it's not the best combination in the world, but we had to choose a day to start the program, so I chose to start it on this day. Venus at Metos has to do with being a part of a small group of people. It has to do with being a part of a community that is close knit and an enclave. And it has to do with having loyalty to that community and to that group and to that enclave. Sometimes it has to do with withdrawing your love within yourself and taking a moment to really invest yourself in self care and self love. But Venus at Metos also has to do with knowing who your people are. I'm a very Venusian person. I'm also a very Admitosian person. And I love this combination because this combination has to do with knowing when you have found your family and knowing when you have found your tribe. And that for me is so important in general. Let's bring me back, Anna. That for me is so important in general. This idea of us finding the places where we belong. And for a lot of us, astrology is that place where we belong. Astrology and magic and mysticism, because we know within our hearts and minds, because our experiences have spoken true and our experiences have told us that we belong here. Because here, we're holding something vital that's important, not just for ourselves, but that's also important for the larger world around us. And if you found your tribe within your astrological community, Godspeed to you within all of your endeavors. And if you haven't found your tribe within your astrological community, then you should know that astrology is wide enough and weird enough and diverse enough and eclectic enough to hold space for each and every one of us. And that is how we're ending this week on the 14th of September 2024 with this reminder that if you believe something and if you know within your heart and mind that something is true and that something is real, then the only thing necessary for other people to also partake and participate in that knowledge with you is your ability to articulate that to them, but also your ability to demonstrate to them these things that you know are true. It's a great day. I love this day, and it's going to be great. So, thank you all so much for joining us here once again for yet another broadcast of next week's astrology. I feel very good about doing less and saying more, because the doing less for me is that we are actually talking about fewer combinations, but I'm having more time to share with you in the in between. And this felt really nice and very wholesome for me. Did it feel nice and wholesome for you? Let me know in the comment section whether or not this is something that you enjoyed. And also, just in general, thank you all so much for always being here and showing up and supporting the work that we do, because I couldn't do this work without your support. And it genuinely means a lot to me to of the student base that we have at Oraculos. Because truthfully, at Oraculos, how we speak about astrology isn't necessarily the same as everybody else is speaking about astrology. And for a long time, I thought that that would be a point of making people feel like they didn't fit into a larger world. But it's actually helps the student base of Oraculos feel like they understand the world in a different way. Not necessarily a better way, but in a different way, in a more planetary way. And to that end, I hope that I can continue to share this sort of planet to planet based astrology with you here on the Oraculos Astrology Show, here at the Oraculos School of Astrology, within our courses, within our lectures, within our everything, because this is the work that I truly feel inspired to do within this lifetime. And I sincerely hope that you continue to stick around for the ride. So, thank you so much for being here. Next week, we are going to continue our planetary series. As you all know, we started the planetary series a long time ago, and then I fell off of the face of the earth because of feelings of personal inadequacy. My feelings of personal inadequacy often prevent me from finishing things that I've started that I really, really feel are amazing, but I don't know if I have the range to hold how amazing those things are. So that got in the way, but we got beyond that and we continued last week with Saturn and Jupiter, as well as with Mars and Venus. And this week, Monday, we're going to be continuing with the Sun and the Moon. And then we're going to be wrapping the whole thing up on Wednesday, on Mercury's Day, talking about Mercury. So that's coming up this week. Please make sure to subscribe to the Oraculos podcast wherever you're listening to us so that you can receive notifications of when these things are happening. Last week, we had 128 people registered for the lecture on Saturn and Jupiter. It's really going to be amazing. We're going to dive into the Sun and the Moon this Monday. I look forward to seeing you there. It's completely free of charge, by the way. So tell your wife, tell your kids, bring your friends, and please do sign up for this event. And then on Wednesday, we're continuing with Mercury. And then on Friday, we're going to bring you once again next week's astrology. But on Saturday, I'm going to invite all of you to join us right here, free of charge, for the first class of our professional astrologers diploma program. It's one thing to hear me talk about it. It's another thing to see it in the flesh. It's not going to be a YouTube live like this. It is going to be something that you have to register for. So please make sure to register for this event by going to our website at oraculosastrology.com, and you can go to the events page, the upcoming events page on our website, and make sure that you sign up so that you can get your seat on the first day of our professional astrologers diploma program so that you could see the magic where the magic happens. Until next time, I love you all so much. I think I tell you that every single week, but I definitely mean it. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Kate O is saying amen. Amen, Kate. Rigo is giving me a thumbs up. Tammy is giving me a thumbs up. That's definitely the finger that I prefer to see. Thank you so much, everybody, for showing up and being a part of this. Tammy is saying that the hair is hairing. Thank you so much, Tammy. I can't wait to get off this call to go jump in the shower because today is I don't even want to show you what's going on underneath here, but and you see, it's also very long. So I'm gonna go take care of this hair and potentially have a nightlife before tomorrow. See, it's doing stuff. Anyway, thank you all so much for showing up today. I love you so much. I can't wait to see you on Monday. Please make sure that you sign up for the events on Monday, because if you don't sign, if you snooze, you lose. So if you don't sign up for it, you should sign up for it. In the words of one of my favorite astrologers on the planet, Christine Skinner. I really love Christine. If you all know Christine, please give Christine a shout out for me. Please let her know how much she's loved. She's a wonderful person. She's a hilarious person. In the words of one of my favorite astrologers on the planet, Christine Skinner, I love you, but I gotta leave you. See you soon. Bye for now.